All right, guys, to be honest, I haven't been counting. I think this is part 6, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. I hope it's part 5 for your sake, but it could be part 6. Let's briefly talk about trait theories, and that'll get us into our final assignment. What do we know about trait theories? It's kind of working out the whole idea of personality from a very different angle. One nice thing about trait theories is we can name traits and we can devise measures to assess people's level on a given trait. We can also then measure people's traits, and then we can look at them in a behavioral situation, in some kind of situation, and use the traits to predict their success or lack of success in that situation. So the nice thing about traits is they can generate a tremendous amount of empirical support. Notice, much of what I've spoken about in the previous parts of this personality lecture are not amenable to empirical support. That being said, there are those that are creative among you, if you so choose, could operationalize many of the qualities we've talked about before and measure them effectively. But that's a different conversation, probably for a different class. So, trait theories then, are a school of psychology that attempts to understand a personality by classifying, measuring, interrelating relatively stable aspects of personality known as traits, hence our definition at the beginning of the lecture. Hippocrates believed that traits were the result of the imbalance or balance of the bodily fluids, so we return to that. Okay. Their personality characteristics that are presumed to exist within the individual and guide his actions under various conditions. So if I develop a trait of generosity, then I'm probably going to be generous with a friend. I might be the person then who gives money to the homeless person. I may be the person who gives a student an extra point, right, to push them over the edge, because generosity is one of my character traits. And as I said way at the beginning, the beauty of traits is they often predict behavior across a wide variety of situations. So they've really got something on the social psychologist who says, in this particular situation, we expect this to occur. No, it's a completely different viewpoint. It's saying, across these situations, we expect this behavior because it exists as a trait. So for discussion board 3, I want you to take the Big 5 personality dimensions. So if you haven't done the Big 5, I want you to do it anyway, even if you've done it before. Let's all get on the same page and use the same instrument. It's web-based. It's relatively quick. The Big 5 personality dimensions: openness to new experience versus a preference for tried and true previous experiences. So openness versus non-openness. Do you like to go to the same restaurant over and over again, or do you hear about a new restaurant opening up and you just got to go to this new place because you've never been there before? The latter describes openness. The previous then describes non-openness. To what extent do you consider yourself conscientious, that is, you can be relied upon, or to what extent are you somewhat undirected and perhaps less reliable? Here we go. Introversion, extroversion. Maybe one of the most important traits, at least according to trait researchers. Your level of introversion versus extroversion has been defined previously. Agreeableness versus antagonism is to what extent do you value going along to get along, and that would be the agreeableness, or to what extent are you willing to be somewhat antagonistic and stick to your guns, right, regardless of how it impacts the interaction. And then neuroticism versus stability. And this is pretty simple. To what extent do you generate emotional stability, kind of stoic, if you will? To what extent is your emotional system more labile? That is more variable. And you can test yourself and I want you to use this site to test yourself. It's Out of Service Com Big 5. I've had a legitimate test of the Big 5 personality, and I've done this website, and they coincide very closely. So that's how I kind of vet what's available on the web. The nice thing about the web is it's easy to get to. Anyone can get to it, basically. And, it does self-scoring. It generates a score and gives you a report. Okay? So Big 5 personality dimensions, that's one part of discussion board 3. There'll be a little more. Now, to what extent do genetics influence personality? And this has been a big question over the last 70, 80 years, right? actually even before that with animal breeding, breeding an aggressive animal with another aggressive animal heighten the likelihood of having aggressive offspring. There's been a long-term project in the Soviet Union, now in Russia, where a scientist was taking foxes, and foxes are not, they're feral and they're not amenable to taming. And the idea was over long-term successive breeding, for foxes that appeared the most tame, could we in fact breed a tame fox? It's an interesting research project because it's continued past that researcher's lifespan. And people continue it on. It looks like there may be some potential to do that, perhaps. So, there's an increasing body of evidence the influence genes have on shaping our personality. And the Big Five, the reason the Big Five is because it's a reliable measure and it seems to be predictive of a lot of observable behaviors. So it becomes kind of the standard when we want to explore personality traits. Big Five are usually the five that are used. And the big question then is, to what extent do genetics influence personality traits? And because the Big Five is the central focus, let's take 123 pairs of identical twins, 127 pairs of fraternal twins, 100% DNA match, 50% DNA match approximately, right? Makes a good study. They're measured on the Big Five personality dimensions, and what do we see? It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty amazing. What we see is the teal bars, right, are the concordance of identical twins on their Big Five personality measures. The red bars are the concordance of fraternal twins, and what we see is a huge difference. So neuroticism, right, in fraternal twins, what we're talking about then is maybe 20% correlation. We see about 42%, over double in identical twins. The same holds true for extroversion, openness, right, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. This is then kind of mind-blowing because what it says is, and it does have kind of a deterministic flavor to it, which many, philosophers and psychologists would argue against, that we've discussed previously, that in fact our personality might be in part determined, genetically determined, that our personality may be a bit out of our control in that regard. Now what we choose to do with it, obviously we still have freedom according to the existentialists, and we still have responsibility in this, but the genetic arguments are saying, wow, that our traits could be 40 to 50% genetically determined depending on what traits we're discussing, right? And so the Big Five, of course, is the important ones that have all the research oomph behind them. Now, let's take then Bandura's reciprocal determinism, and remember that, the behavior, the relationship of behavior and environment and personality. But our new knowledge, and thank you science for always adding new knowledge and making us think even harder, genetics has a role in this, and genetics has a link to personality, right? And then we see biology, what we understand about neuroscience, our fantastic new science, right? Brain structure, neurotransmitter functioning has an effect on personality as well. And you go, oh my God, wow. So now the personality box has deterministic qualities to it based on neural structure and genetics. Mind-blowing, if you will. But let's think about this. What was the first discussion board we did in this class? Epigenetics. So someone's got to come along, maybe it's one of you guys who wants to build a whole new theoretical relationship here of genetics, right? Is we might need an arrow from environment all the way back to genetics, that is that epigenetic link, right? So this may already be out of date according to the knowledge that we possess at this time. Wow. Science is a world of opportunity. There's always opportunity to go beyond, and we embrace that. Now, enough said about that. Let's get to the rest of discussion board 3, patterns and personality types. So in this case, what we're saying is there are certain types of people. based on the measures that we're going to use. That we can categorize people, that is, we can put people into boxes, so to speak. And people who have been placed in the same box then share these same characteristics and should behave in similar ways given the same situation. Right? So, it's these clusters of personality traits that are coalesced into these types, and it's very taxonometric. What that means is we are placed into a box that describes us, right? Now, found in the same pattern in many people. So I'd like you to take the Myers-Briggs typology, the Myers-Briggs type inventory. Now, remember, I called this a Jungian typology, and what this is going to look at then is, in fact, the aspects of your constellation of 4 trait combinations. So it's going to use your introversion, your extroversion, your sensation versus intuition. Right, sweetie? So for example, I'm an ENTJ. And what does that mean? I'm extroverted. I'm more intuitive than sensing. I'm more thinking than feeling. And I'm more judging than perceiving. So those are the 4 constellations you'll be measured on. And then go ahead and read the assignment. Just a comparison. Does it resonate with you? Does it make sense? So this is not what I would call a tough assignment. Yeah, it'll consume a little of your time. The reason I have you do it is so that you can take a look at yourself. You can begin to introspect on the basis of these instruments developed by psychologists to, in the first case, assess your big five traits, and then in the second case, to look at your type. And for Myers-Briggs, right, it's 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 is the possibility of the scores. So there's 16 boxes that can be placed in. And that might have a meaning to you. Now, Myers-Briggs doesn't get a lot of empirical. Big Five seems to be really predictive, and we talk about it in organizational psychology, of certain behaviors in the workplace, observable. Myers-Briggs has very little empirical support, but people still love it, right? And the weird thing is, it can resonate very strongly. If you read about an ENTJ, yeah, I'm a freaking ENTJ, up one side and down the other. Will it predict my behavior? I think it does, but empirically it's just not gotten the support. So that's about it. And I know this was a super long one. I think personality is super critical, and obviously I really blew it out, adding in all the existential stuff. Anyway, I hope this supplies you with a robust toolkit to face your adjustment challenges and kind of understand who you are and how you got there and how you might go to wherever it is you believe you might need to go. That's kind of the whole purpose behind this, was an adjustment toolkit. So I want you guys to have a great day, and thank you.